Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Real United States. I'm your host, Paul Campbell, and behind the camera, as always, is our camera operator, my wife, Beverly Campbell. We're here again in Sault Saint Marie, Michigan, on the banks of the St. Mary's River, in front of the SS Valley Camp. Now, the SS Valley Camp is a museum ship now. It was built in 1917 as an ore carrier. It hauled iron ore and coal during its service period. It's 550 feet long with a gross tonnage capacity of 12,000 tons. Now that sounds like a lot of boat. It is, but by ore freighter standards here in the Great Lakes, that's actually a relatively small boat. Now, the boat served up until 1967, when it was finally decommissioned and then bought and turned into a museum later. But it wasn't because of its age that it was retired. It was because of its 1,800 horsepower triple expanding steam engine that's fired by coal that it was actually retired. And that engine is still in this ship, and we're hopefully going to get down there and be able to get some shots of it for you. It's really a very nice, preserved vessel. I've been on this ship before, but it was about 35 years ago. So at this point, I would like to give a shout out to my daughter, Peggy. Peggy, we're back here again. My daughter at the time when we were here was just an infant babe in arms. And I harassed her a little bit while we were on board, and she's never forgotten it. So it's really a very nice opportunity for us to get on board and show you an early 20th century steam-powered coal and iron ore hauling vessel. Iron ore was a huge commodity through this part of the country, with the Iron Range being just up across Lake Superior from us. All across northern Michigan and up into northern Wisconsin and Minnesota, huge amounts of iron ore has been mined over the last couple of centuries and brought down here to ports in Ohio and down along to Pennsylvania, also here in Michigan, down the Detroit area. So a lot of iron ore came from this area on board ships very much like this one. An entire fleet of ships operated through here for, well, like I say, well over a century. So join us on board. We're going to show you around the SS Valley Camp. So Republic Steel was actually the last owner of the ship at the time that it was retired. And here you see their flag, of the company flag that would have been used, and some of the equipment associated with the Valley Camp. We've just gotten inside of the ship, so Bev, if you can pan up a little bit and show them, this is the structure of one of the cargo holds. They've actually cut a hole in the side of the ship that would allow to make a doorway. So we are actually inside of where the coal or iron ore would have been held when the ship was in service. Now we're doing something a little bit different here today, folks. We're using the shotgun mic instead of the lavalier mic indoors here, and I'm hoping this is going to turn out okay. This is the emergency wheel that was mounted on the ship at the time that it was built. This wasn't the main wheel, this is the emergency wheel. And these, the telegraph and the compass, these would have been mounted in the bridge. These are just here because things have been rearranged for display purposes, but these are the original equipment. Pretty massive wheel, but then again, it's a pretty massive ship, so the sort of thing you would have expected in something like this. Now here, they actually have taken out the deck or added this, I'm not sure. And this microphone doesn't hear terribly well on the side. So this is room, this massive room here, is actually the cargo area that would have contained iron ore at the time the ship was in service. And you can see that this is a pretty massive area, yeah, even though this is a relatively small ship, whence it could carry 12,000 tons of cargo. I want to just show here the part that hasn't been painted or restored over in the main. What I'm especially eager to get to is the engine room and to the galley. Those are where all the mechanical equipment is. Those are just sort of my thing. And I think you'll find those kind of interesting. Oh, this is kind of interesting. This is an interesting piece of equipment right here. It's a large wooden sledgehammer. What's so interesting about that, you ask? Well, that would have been actually used by a crew member to knock ice off of the railings and off of the deck towards the very late part of the season, when the spray would come up over and form ice on everything. And somebody would have to go out every so often and bust it loose to get it off of the ship. Look what we have here. We have Fresnel lenses. In 1917, these would have been lit probably with kerosene. Many of the lamps from that era were actually kerosene burning lamps. And these would have been the lights that lit the ship, whether they be mast lights or whatever signal lights. And here we have a large fourth order Fresnel lens here. Quite a large one, you can see. Standing as close to it as I possibly can, I don't want to touch it. Gives you some idea of the scale of this. And it does have some damage to it, but this is just a beautiful, beautiful piece. I think that in fact, and I got to remember that this microphone works differently than the lavalier mic, so I have to turn back towards it. But I think this is probably a lead crystal Fresnel lens. It's just beautiful. I find myself saying that a lot. There's a large signal bell here. I'm just dying to hit this with something hard, but I'd probably get in trouble.
Oh, come on, can't I do it? There we go.
Here's another Fresnel lens from what would have been an oil light that's then housed inside of another structure to protect it from the high winds out on the Great Lakes. Makes you wonder sometimes, if, before the advent of electric lights, how difficult it was to keep lights lit, because they were in fact coal oil or kerosene oil lamps. Another one of those fourth order Fresnel lenses, they actually have an incandescent bulb inside of this to give you some idea of the effect. And there's just something about Fresnel lenses that I just adore. Okay, we're gonna get to the fun part. Although there's lots more to see up in the rest of the ship, but I want to head for the engine room. Now, I had mentioned that the reason that this ship was retired was because of its boiler, its triple expanding steam engine, and the fact that this was actually fired by coal. It was not fired by oil or diesel fuel. And here is the coal bunker. The coal would have been loaded in from above and fed from here to get back to the engine, or to the boilers to run the engines.
How you doing?
Good. So we're actually essentially in the boiler room, because the boiler and the engine were two separate components. The boiler generated the steam, which then operated the engine aft of the boiler room. And it's difficult to show on camera, but this ginormous structure in front of us is part of the boiler. Sure, we're getting some ambient noise with this microphone from equipment that's running here, but this is in fact the engine. This is the steam engine that ran this vessel, and it's one of the things I remember about this. It's very interesting because the block where the pistons are and the area where the crank is are separated by probably 6 or 8 feet, where the actual piston rods are just out in the open air. So it's not one huge block of an engine as you think about. It's actually two separate pieces. The engine block, the steam expansion area here, and then where the crankshaft is that drives the engine down on the deck below. Inside of the engine, and it was a pretty spectacular sight to be able to look up into the pistons and down below yourself at the crank. That's how big this is. But we're going to have to see if we can still do that or not. Things have changed a lot in 35 years. Okay, folks, I don't usually do this, but Sergei Beklikov, since you're in the hospital, this is for you. Here's the aft head of the boat. This is kind of cool. Not only was steam used to run the engine, to turn the crank and run the propeller, but steam power was also used for the power steering unit. And this massive machine that you see behind me is in fact the power steering. It was a steam-operated power steering unit that then turned this huge gear in the back. And that shaft you see coming through then is the rudder post. And the rudder would be then down below that. And we are in the very aft of the ship.
Could you point out the gear again, because it's hard to see with the yellow.
Okay, right here behind this yellow band is a giant ring gear that runs around the shaft that operates the rudder. That's the rudder shaft. And this is all operated by this smaller pinion gear that's all driven by this steam-operated power steering unit. Now back here is also where the ship's laundry is. You see the old early 20th century style wringer washer, where your wash was agitated in the tub, and then you'd take it out and run it through the wringer. This is a power operated wringer, and squeeze the water out of it. It didn't have a spin dry in those days, and that was how they did their laundry on board ship. But this would have been the sort of wash machine you'd have found in any household in the early part of the 20th century in the United States. Steam heat. They used steam for everything because they had lots of it. It's a cast iron register, boiler register. It's one solid piece of cast iron all plumbed into the steam lines to keep this part of the boat warm in the colder months. And trust me, up on Lake Superior in October, November, it gets very, very cold. And even in the spring when the ships start to run, they're running when there's still ice on the lakes. So having some heat of some kind in this area would really be a requirement. Certainly for me. Okay, we're up on the main deck outside on the deck of the ship. You can see behind me here all the hatch covers. These are all locked down, supposedly watertight when they were in their operating days. And this is, you would have lifted these off and a big chute would have filled the cargo holds with coal or ore, whatever they were hauling at the time. Then these would have been lifted back on and clamped in place for the voyage to their final destination where they were offloaded and sold. And then the bridge is the structure in front of me in the front of the boat, the bow of the boat, as it were. So this is where the wheelhouse would have been, and all the controls, the telegraph that sent messages back to the engine room for speed settings and those sorts of things, where the wheel is that would of course transmitted signals back to the power steering unit that we looked at earlier. And we're probably close to 30 feet above water level here on the deck. Okay, we're up at the bow of the Valley Camp right now, and this style of ship that's been used on the Great Lakes for a long, long time actually has the superstructures in the fore and aft rather than in the center of the ship. This allows the deck to be open for hatch covers for carrying cargo. Now, this forward structure, I was just reminded, is actually, this is a very old sailing ship term for a structure on the front of a boat, the forecastle. And that's where the wheelhouse and the bridge are. And we're going to step inside here and show you. And Beverly's going to be real careful because it's quite a step for her. But it's just beautiful. It's all clear oak interior in here. Really very pretty. This is one of the quarters where the watchman and wheelsman would have lived, would have slept, with a single dresser and a basin here, heater in here, you notice. And again, this is all a wood interior in this room. This is all paneled. It's been since painted, but if you look where there was an item removed, you'll see that that is in fact clear oak, solid oak paneling on the walls. So this, when this boat was first built in 1917, was really elaborately decorated. This is the mate's quarters. It's a little more extensive, higher ranking officer. The quarters in the front with a little area with a chair in there to sit, and his own private bath. Whereas the crew's bath was communal. It was out here in the hall. Okay. You still rolling? Oh, cool. For those of you who have ever owned a boat, this is something you absolutely do not want to be without. This is a windlass. This is what you use to lift your anchors. On large ships, obviously, it is an absolute necessity. For those of us that have lived on board pleasure craft, it's a very nice thing to have, but many people don't. They have to hoist their anchor by themselves. So, obviously on a ship, absolute necessity. There's no way you could lift a ship's anchor by hand. And you can see how the anchor chain falls into a set of recesses in this large wheel so that it can be pulled up, and that is in fact the anchor chain that you're seeing right there. So here we are on the wheelhouse, or the bridge, of the SS Valley Camp. And again, you see the entire inside of the bridge is completely trimmed out in oak, solid oak paneling, oak moldings, all the peripheral little nooks and things are all oak. It's all solid wood, beautiful, beautiful work that was done in 1917. Wooden ceilings. You can see why fire on board a ship was such an incredible concern, even in the age of steel ships, because much of the interior structure of it was covered in wood. And of course, here is the main steering wheel, the main wheel, the helm, the compass, the telegraph, all the equipment that they used to operate and navigate the ship. Here's the chart table and an official United States Lake Superior chart. I actually own one of these that shows all the depths in fathoms, I believe. and the channels across Lake Superior, which is predominantly the operating range of this vessel. Quite a view from up here. Bev can take a peek out this back window in the aft of the wheelhouse here. That you have a good view all the way past the back of the boat. Whence the reason for having this built way up on top of the forecastle. So now we're going to go back and we're going to visit the aft of the boat where I believe the galley is. Okay, here inside of the Maritime Museum, in the hold of the SS Valley Camp, is one of the actual lifeboats from the SS Edmund Fitzgerald. Edmund Fitzgerald, of course, was a ore freighter, large ore freighter on the Great Lakes. It went down just outside of Whitefish Bay on the edge of Lake Superior in the mid-1970s. Now, for those of you who are avid followers of the Real United States here on YouTube, you may recall us doing a small piece about it in our episode on the Mariners Church in downtown Detroit. And in fact, that is referenced in the song The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by singer-songwriter Gordon Lightfoot. Well, this is the actual, one of the actual lifeboats from that fated ship. You can see it's tore up pretty bad, although it never got a chance to be used. The ship, we now understand, split in half and sank almost instantly, carrying all 29 souls aboard to the bottom. But this is an important part of history. Sad as it may be, it's nice to have this piece of history have been rescued from Lake Superior and here on display at the SS Valley Camp Maritime Museum. I'm going to get a shot here from the front. You can see how it's just torn apart. It's just ripped the middle right along the rivet seam. So we'd like to thank you for joining us here on the Real United States, here in Sault Saint Marie, Michigan, aboard the SS Valley Camp. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we hope you'll share it with your friends and family. That really helps us out a lot. If you have questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section below. We try to get back to everyone we can just as soon as we possibly can. If you haven't already, pick subscribe and join us for future episodes. We'd love to have you come along. And as always, thank you for watching.